Okay, thank you. So back to public session, still on item 7, the Environment SK Finance Report. Just to reiterate a point I finally made in private session, there were a number of questions that could have been asked in public session based upon publicly available accounts on Companies House. I would like those minuted in the public session minutes, although we're not going to cover the same ground again. Given what we've heard, and without straying back into pink papers again, does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Okay, I have a couple of questions. First of all, a process question, really. We're representing the shareholders of Environment SK, and we're taking a decision on surcharging our client here. Why are we not doing that in the finance meeting? Why are we not taking that to the FEDCO meeting or having? I'm sure that the chairman of the FEDCO committee is an amiable chap. I'm sure he would have agreed to put it on the agenda. But yeah, I was a little bit struck by wondering whether we're at the right, whether some of our questions are from a company perspective or from a council perspective here. So that's just a small comment on process. My other concern is, whilst I note the accounts, and I'm grateful for the answers, I think they were very detailed. I'm grateful for that. I definitely have concerns about this surcharge. I have concerns that 42% of it is, or sorry, 32% of it is going to hit the special expense areas. The Grantham councillors, the Grantham residents are going to be hit for £43,000. We know that there are issues with the specification, so we know that that's challenging for us to look the Grantham councillors in the eye and hit Grantham for £43,000 and Stamford for £88,000. We effectively don't have the MIS to explain that. So I have concerns about that. I have concerns that any one part of the district, as a Grantham councillor, but as a councillor, I have concerns that any one part of the district is being hit for this surcharge. I also, on item 4, other options considered, I think I would like officers and directors of this company to think of other options, because I think there are other options. Whilst I understand and we've received some excellent answers to some of the issues faced, and it is a challenging financial environment. Paragraph 4, that there are no other options, doesn't convince me, I'm afraid. I think there are other options to secure the financial sustainability of this company. So if I can ask those companies, first of all, on the process, who would that go to? Perhaps Richard Watts. Thank you.
Thank you. So partly it's a timing and a sequencing pressure, because as you appreciate, the joint scrutiny meeting's already taken place to discuss the budget. The indicative proposals have gone to Cabinet the day after, on the 13th. We're out to consultation at the moment, and Cabinet need to decide their final budgetary proposals on the 8th of February. And as you know, FEDCO is the 15th of February. So there's a logic as to why the sequencing is the way it is. But ultimately as well, this committee is also responsible for approving the business plans of the companies, which drives the funding levels that are appropriate to be put forward through the budgetary process as well. So this is a request by the company to increase their grounds maintenance fee to reflect you've already heard the narrative as to why that explanation has been put forward. So there is a logic as to why it be pushed through this company's committee as well. Just going back to the methodology that's been adopted to allocate those costs, it follows very much the allocation that's been already presented to the Joint Scrutiny Committee. And if members can recall that particular pack on table 7, it broke out the different fund types that are driving the SK costs, which is general fund, HRA, and the special expense areas. And of course, from an ESK point of view, that separation is irrelevant. It's one client contractor relationship, and it's one contract. How the nuances work from the council's side is for the council to determine. And what it's taken is the methodology that's been adopted through the specification costs and where they fall. And that is 26% is general fund related, 42% is HRA related and 32% is special expense area. And then we've since broken that special expense area down further into the component parts. And as you're aware, Bourne is transferring from next April. So there are 3 special expense areas remaining, which are Langtoft, Stamford and Grantham. The Langtoft proportionate share of that cost is de minimis. It's below £500. So the allocation has then been taken between Grantham and Stamford, and it falls 43,000 for Grantham and 8,000 for Stamford. And that follows that same logic of how the costs are allocated across those headings. So that's the methodology that's been adopted, and that follows the sequencing that's already been established through the budget setting process.
So a couple of interesting points there just to come back on. So are you saying that this will come before FEDCO? So we are today requesting a surcharge of our client of £160,000, and that this is a suggested way of funding that surcharge, but FEDCO might push back and say, look, we want to fund that differently.
No, the timing won't allow that. The methodology adopted is already established, is what I'm saying. In the funding and how it's allocated out follows the specification, and how the funding of the specification is broken out. That's well established. So this additional cost is following that same methodology. But in terms of timing, as I said, 15th of February is the next FEDCO meeting. That is some 7 days after the final budget proposals. In legislation, the budget proposals have to be agreed by the 12th of February, which is why this now needs to go to Cabinet on the 8th and be included in Cabinet's final budget recommendations that then go on to Council. So the timing will not allow FEDCO to have further involvement in this.
Well, I can confirm FEDCO have not been made aware of this, and I think the committee for FEDCO could have been brought forward to discuss this. But again, I mean, just to reiterate, part of this report says that the specification, some great work is being done in making the specification accurate, but it's wildly inaccurate at the moment. But based upon that wildly inaccurate specification, and as I say, there's some fabulous work doing to bring it up to speed, we are allocating the costs against a known to be wildly inaccurate specification. And that's what I find tough to support. I as a Grantham councillor, we are the taxpayer that gets hit the hardest. Yeah, we may have the most amount of lawns to cut, or whatever, the most amount of work to do here. But the reality is that probably says that most of the inaccuracies could be in Grantham. Okay, are there any other questions on this report in the public domain from the committee first? Okay, I'll just come back for a couple of comments from the officers. Ken Lyon, please.
Yeah, so you raised a question also about other options considered, is one of your points. So just to say, the ESK throughout this year and the client have been looking at options around the scope of works and things like that to try and manage the costs. And there was some progress made on that, but given the extensive piece of work that the client's currently commissioned around the specification, which you've just referred to, that needs to be complete before the client can make some decisions around other options, which obviously ESK will work with the client in implementing. But it's not to say that other options haven't been considered during the year to manage the cost, because I know that at all levels, ESK and the client side have been involved in quite a lot of discussions to do that.
Gary Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to respond back from the client side perspective on what you were describing. I understand the point you were making. I wouldn't use the terminology that you did in this regard. The specification, we have a specification, it is in place. It is a complex one that is historic and has had multiple variation orders overlaid. So it is right and proper that we are reviewing that at the moment. The mapping exercise work that is underway also hasn't been done for a number of years, and that again will put us into a much stronger position. But at the moment, that mapping work isn't fine, and it is wildly out. Now we need to wait to the end of that process till we know for sure one way or the other. But I just wanted to say that we do have an appropriate specification in place. It is in the process of being updated, and that will improve it going forward, and indeed improve our options around assuring that we continue to seek value for money from this service. Thank you.
Okay, and the Vice Chairman and I would like to thank you for showing us the work that's been done on the specification. I know that a huge amount of work has gone into that. We're grateful for that. Are there any other comments and questions on this report? Councillor Rice-Oxley.
I'd just like to ask about advertising. So obviously the company's been trying to expand and take on new work over this time. It strikes me that the specification work is hugely important. It's obviously been done in a lot of detail. It's very, very creditable to the people involved. Given that it would appear that at least some of the work that's been done has sort of broken even at best, is the company still advertising for new work, or has that been sort of suspended while the specification is fully completed in order for the new business plan to be formed going forward? Thank you.
Ken Lyon.
So the company has advertised and approached new work. At the moment, the general approach, and I think it's outlined in the paper, has been around looking at sort of similar, sort of what I would call like-minded organisations like parish councils and individuals like that. But there has also been a number of bits of work taking place with private individuals or businesses. But in general, at the moment, the approach is around the core contract and as I say, what I call like-minded organisations that cover parish councils and other similar things.
Okay, are there any other comments and questions in the room? Okay, moving to the recommendations. So to take these separately, well, the first item is just to note. So moving on to recommendation 2, the Companies Committee is asked to recommend the budget proposals for 22-23, including additional £160,000. Do I have a proposer for that? Do I have a proposer for that in the room? Is that Councillor Whittington is there to propose it? Do I have a seconder for that in the room? Is there anybody on this committee prepared to second that proposal? Okay, there appears to be nobody in the room that is prepared to second that proposal. Okay, I think we have to make progress. That recommendation is rejected. Can I return for a comment on the presenter of the report, please, before we proceed?
Yeah, I mean, that's hugely disappointing, because obviously that was an uplift that was needed to ensure that the contract was managed until the up-to-date specification was done. So I'm slightly disappointed that the committee has chosen that course of action.
Okay, if there's nobody there to propose or second that, unless anybody wants to stay on this point, I suggest we move forward. Item 8, future ways of working with Invest SK. Karen Bradford.
Chairman, yeah, I just wanted to come on that point. I know we had a proposer, but no seconder for that recommendation. I just think the committee need to just fully understand the decision that they're taking at this point. Therefore, we do have a contract where we are going to struggle to bring forward the workforce for the delivery of the specification that we do have now. We can still go to out to advert for the workforce, but we will only be paying minimum wage. We've got a contract which will not be able to meet its fuel requirements to move the workforce around the district, meeting the specification that we have to date, and that's before any amendments to the specification. So if there is no positive recommendations that come from this committee here today to go forward to Cabinet, therefore it could not be considered as part of this year's budget. Therefore, we will be paying the minimum wage of £9.44, and we will struggle to get the workforce for delivering of the grounds maintenance contract for 22-23. I just wanted to make you aware of the risk of the decision that has just been taken.
Okay, is there anybody in the room that wants to comment on that or second a vote? Councillor Whitty.
Really just give some context as to why I was prepared to propose it. I don't particularly, it's a difficult one for me to propose. I propose it because I don't feel at the moment, given where we are, that we have any other option other than to agree to our recommendation, which is why I was prepared to propose it. So that's just it. For me, it's not a great position to be in, but I felt we had no other option other than to do it, hence my reason for proposing it. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Are there any other comments and questions on this item of business, or anybody prepared to second this to move on? Councillor Thomas. A microphone, please.
I value Councillor Whittington's thoughts, and so I'm prepared to second it. Thank you.
Okay, so this has been duly proposed and seconded. Before we move to the vote, Councillor Baxter.
Chair, you did invite comments on the reason why we didn't propose and second it. I don't think we should be browbeaten by the officers into making decisions that we clearly don't want to. Neither do I think that we should be told what we've got to do by officers. We've had this proposal in front of us. We've been through the accounts. We've been through the reports that have been put in front of us. If they're not convincing, if the officers, if the cabinet members that are proposing these reports can't present them in such a way as to convince the committee, then we shouldn't be browbeaten into agreeing with something we don't agree with. Either we agree with it or not. We shouldn't be proposing it and seconding it. The problem is not our problem, is it? It's a problem for the company. It's for the company directors to come up with a more convincing argument as to why we should have to fund that company. There are other suppliers of grounds maintenance out there. There are other ways of presenting this argument. If it's a landmark, really. This is the first time I can remember when a proposal has come to the committee and the committee has said, no, we're not convinced. And I think it was a real step forward. And it's a shame that members have caved in to the pressure from senior officers that we should have to do this. Let the cabinet worry about it. Let the company directors worry about it, because it's not our job to be told what to do. We clearly didn't want to have this recommendation, and I still don't.
Okay, your comments are noted, but it has now been duly proposed and seconded. I would like to move to a vote, but I'll take a couple of closing comments and then I'll move to a vote and move forward. Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It seems to me that clearly the members of this committee have not been convinced yet of the need for this particular part of the proposal. Surely the options, there are still a lot of options then for the cabinet and the officers who are directors to go back and think of other things. They can just say, well, we do not acknowledge the wisdom of the finance of the company's committee, and we will still present as part of the budget the requirement to do what they feel they need to do. So they can bring it back as part of the budget. It doesn't mean to say that because we have not recommended it, then it falls. There's no possibility that is the case, that it falls. They can still bring it forward to as part of the budget. They can still present it to the full council when it meets to have the budget. So it's not necessarily the whole thing falls and we have to pay the minimum wage and we have to do all those drastic, horrible things that have been mentioned as a threat to us. I don't like the sort of threat that we are causing, destroying the company and the workers in the company, whatever else. There are other ways to look at it. There are other ways to finance it. Rather than so on. So there are other ways to look at it, other ways to do it. And if they do not get the recommendation from this committee, then they've got to go away and find those other ways if they feel it is important and put it straight back in the budget regardless of the failure of this committee to.
Fine. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think, we all know that Environment SK is in a challenging position as a company. And I know that, Councillor Stokes and the rest of the board are working on those challenges. And Councillor Knowles is absolutely right. I think we can take the feeling of this committee and obviously, as an administration, go away and look at Environment SK as to where it is. And then, of course, we can always propose an amendment, as has already been said, at the budget meeting later on this year.
Okay, I'm grateful. It has now been duly proposed and seconded. So, apologies. So the recommendation 2 of agenda item 7, all those in favour of the recommendation to include an additional £160,000 in contract fee to the council grounds maintenance service, if you can raise your hand, please. So that is 2 in favour. All those against? 3 against, and any abstentions? 1 abstention, so that is not carried. Okay, I would like to make some progress. Moving on to item 8, future ways of working with Invest SK. This is in the hands of
As
Councillor Linda Wotton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The report proposes insourcing the economic development and regeneration activities undertaken by Invest SK Limited. Companies Committee's view is sought on the proposed direction of travel. The report details the establishment of Invest SK over 4 years ago, from a sizable company to the current staffing structure of 3 permanent and 3 fixed-term colleagues. As detailed at paragraph 1.3, the council's funding levels peaked at just over 1.3 million and are currently sat at 370,000, with over 84% allocated towards staffing costs. A link to the latest Invest SK annual report and financial statement is provided in the background papers section. Accounting for the impact of the pandemic, and since the introduction of the council's corporate plan in 2020, the business model has completely shifted. I beg your pardon, shifted. As confirmed in the minutes of this committee's November meeting, members received a verbal update on the successes achieved, particularly during the pandemic, and a reminder is included in the report at paragraph 1.10. 3 months ago, the Invest SK board reviewed the current operating model to consider the best way forward for the company to be constituted to contribute effectively to key growth and regeneration strategies and policies. The advantages and disadvantages of Invest SK as an arm's length company of the council are illustrated in table 2, paragraph 1.16. The review concluded that the current operating model is unsustainable and failing to make the best use of the skill sets within the business. Table 3 at paragraph 1.19 identifies different models of operation. The 3 available options are detailed at paragraph 3.1, with the preferred option considered to provide the greatest opportunity to improve outcomes whilst delivering future efficiencies, being to insource Invest SK and 2P the staff to the council. The cost of transferring the staff to the council is detailed under the financial implications section of the report. It is proposed that the reserve is called upon to offset the cost. The 2 appended pink papers relating to the inequalities impact assessment and staffing costs are exempt due to their confidential content. The report has 4 recommendations relating to 1, dissolving the company, 2, retaining the successful Invest SK brand, 3, utilisation of the reserve, and 3, developing a communication plan. This committee is being asked to make recommendations to be presented to the council's cabinet meeting scheduled for the 8th of February. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. As I say, I'm also noted that an element of this report is on pink papers. If I can stick to the public domain areas first, please. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report, which is most welcome. It solves a number of problems of Invest SK, which it has had since its foundation, from my point of view. I would note that in paragraph 1.2, I would dispute that it was established in October 2017. It was incorporated in June 2018, but that's by the by, really. This Invest SK project was the flagship of the Peterborough project, where the previous leader of the council brought all these wonderful ideas from his previous authority and presented them as a way of creating a self-sustaining council with all kinds of different ideas, including the 3 new leisure centres, the change of the cattle market in Stamford, and so many other things which have been not delivered. Alongside that, we had Deliver SK, which came, we spent £100,000 on it, and then it disappeared. We had there was another one, Homes SK that never quite surfaced and then went back below. And this was all the great future. We were going to escape the shackles of local government bureaucracy and be able to set our own fees and charges. And then throughout the project, we had 2 troubles. First of all, the secrecy. We couldn't find out what the money was being spent on. And it's only in the last few weeks that we've got any detail of what the money has been spent on. And a lot of that in private on pink papers. And then the other problem of it was nobody knew what was going on. So we had officers in the council. Some of them worked for the council. Their bosses worked for Invest SK, but they in turn were reporting back to the council. In markets, for markets at one point were Invest SK. The art centres were Invest SK, and really no one knew what the hell was going on. So bringing it back in-house will at least establish that all these functions are actual council functions. My remaining so apart from welcoming the dissolution of Invest SK and acknowledging it as a project which might have been something but has lost faith with everybody involved and is now defunct. What's happened to our £3.5 million? Since the inception of the project, the accounts show that Invest SK has been responsible for about £3.5 million. What have we got to show for it? I know that during the hard times of the COVID pandemic, there was delivery of some of the grant funding and so on. In fact, Invest SK handed out grants by itself before the pandemic, up to £50,000 on one particular dance school in Grantham, I understand. But really, where is the rest of our money? Because all the good things that are said about Invest SK basically are the basic functions of a local authority and could have been done in-house. So where has been the added value? I guess nobody minds now because it's coming back in-house.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think Invest SK, and obviously I'm not going to go into the matters of detail, but obviously in terms of the budget and where it's been spent, and Councillor Baxter's alluded to a certain figure, even if that was part of the council, there would still be a figure pretty similar along the same lines as that, because we still have the salary costs of the people that work within that department. Now, the previous leader determined that a number of the council services should move into Invest SK, and it was going to be a wider company that was going to sell services to other local authorities, similar to the other entity that I think we all know, which is called Opportunity Peterborough. Now, when I became leader, I realigned where I felt it was going and where I felt that Invest SK had its priorities and what it should focus on. So a number of those services were returned back to the council. And then Invest SK was then designed to focus on the visitor economy in terms of getting people here and getting that economic spend, but also in terms of the business engagement, the business investment, and actually encouraging and growing businesses in this district. Now, of course, I became officially, I think, leader in the September of the 2019. Obviously, by the March, we'd gone into the first lockdown period. The team, as Councillor Baxter has already alluded to, has worked incredibly hard and delivered over £50 million to over 3,000 businesses over the last 2 years. They are still dealing with further business grants, thanks to the Omicron budgets that we've been gifted from government. In that time, they have also, through working with our officers, secured over £5.5 million into Grantham through the Future High Street Fund. They've also delivered over 1.2 million into the Historic Action Zone funding. We've had rebranded markets. We've done business events. And if I go back to before we had Invest SK, we did not really have a successful economic development team within this council. If you asked for the contact details of the top 10 businesses in this district, we did not have them. We did not have the business intelligence on the ground. We didn't know what businesses needed, and we didn't know where they needed to grow and what the pressures were. We now have a fantastic network of business engagement with all of the business clubs. All of the business clubs have benefited from grants from this council as well. And we have done some fantastic things through Invest SK in supporting businesses. One of them, namely, obviously, we've got St. Martin's Park, which has been a great success in taking that to the private market. We've also been assisting more recently. If you look at the site south of Grantham, in terms of, I think it's 50 acres of light industrial space, we've got some fantastic opportunities, and the team have got some fantastic networks now compared to where we have. So Invest SK, for me, is obviously as chairman of the board and obviously as leader of the council, Invest SK is critical to the future of our organisation. I think for me, the administrative burden of running the company is disproportionate now to the staffing levels and the budget levels. So I think a seamless transition, given all of the support functions already being provided by the district council. And actually, if anything, through the pandemic, the relationship between SKDC and Invest SK is much stronger than it has been previously, and excellent ways of working are in place. And an example of that I've already highlighted is the grants process. The role of the team is much more clearer and it's much more defined now than I think it has ever been. It's got that refined remit in terms of that business support, regen and tourism, all which fit very well within a normal, typical local authority economic development function. It's a strong, dynamic team. They work really well. We need to retain the brand. That's what has been one of the biggest investments, is people know and recognise Invest SK and they engage with Invest SK, which is even more importantly. And as part of this, we obviously need to get the messaging right in terms of transitioning back into the council, if this is what the company's committee determine ultimately. But the operation remains the same. It just wouldn't be run as a separate company.
Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I think after sort of been on this committee for a while and, having reports on Invest SK coming to us, I'm really quite pleased that actually it is coming back in-house, actually. I think, as Councillor Cook has said, a lot of the services have already come back in, so I think it makes sense to bring the rest in as well. Just in terms, but my question really is, obviously, I'm referring to the pink papers, but not specifically, because in the pink papers, there's been a very good impact assessment on the staff, which has been included, which I really welcome. But I just want to sort of know, obviously, we're making the decision today, but I'm just wondering, from the point of view of the staff of Invest SK, have they been consulted prior to this meeting and made aware of what's potentially going on and the impact it might have on them? Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Nicola McCoy-Brown.
Thank you. Yes, all the staff have been made aware.
Councillor Knoll.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Invest SK was created before I became a member of this body. And I think it was in 2016, 17, whenever. I've only known it since 2019. And I was very concerned right from the start that we never saw any objectives, measurable, accountable, anything about this company. It was just a means of, we'd given them a lot of money to spend or to whatever else with it. without really understanding the benefits from it. I am very, very pleased now that it's coming back into the main fold of SKDC. I wonder why it was ever taken out in the first place. Would it have not been possible? One of the big successes is to get a brand. I do recognise that the SK Invest brand has been established and would want to keep it, and I'm pleased with that. But was it ever necessary to take it out of SKDC in order to create a brand like that in the first instance? However, it is coming back. I balk a bit at the question 110 on page 21, 110. One of the major achievements, and we've said it again, Councillor Cook has said it again, one of the major achievements was to give away £51 million. I think anybody could happily give one away £51 million quite easily at the end of the day, but I have a doubt about some of that. Right at the beginning of that, I wrote to the Chief Executive about the methodology of giving that money away, and she assured me, and I'm sure she was correct, that it was all done on a very objective basis. It was a form filled in, it was a form checked, it was a tick box exercise, and if all the boxes were ticked, the money was paid, and there was no subjective part to this. And I understand that, but I have an understanding of an allegation, say in Bourne, that a company was created, got an address by renting a property, never opened as a business, advertised a business on the door, never visited the premises, took the home 10 grand. I'm alleging this because I can't prove it, but I have good authority.
I think we can't talk about specific cases in a meeting, Councillor. So if you can move on, please.
All right, I'll move on away from that. But it's been in the press recently, nationally, that a lot of that money was fraudulently paid. And I'm wondering, I'm not blaming the council in any way, but we're wondering whether at some stage the administration of that was maybe loose or whatever else like that, but it followed the rules. I understand that. But even yesterday, a minister withdrew because of the failure to chase that. I'll come off that.
I understand your concerns. You're talking about a national issue there, unrelated really to the specific investors.
I can't mention the specific, and I can't mention as a national. It wonders where we can sort of mention that. But having said that, I do recognise some of the benefits that's come from Invest SK.
Well, just to comment on that, that's not an issue that uniquely affects Invest SK. So I think that's a slightly unfair criticism. But if I could move you to your point, please. Thank you.
Okay, right, yeah, okay. So I'm very happy that it's coming back into SKDC. I recognise the brand that is well recognised across all the towns and across Bourne and on business in Bourne, and I welcome the retention of that. On a wider basis, this was all part, I'm taking a comment that Ashley Baxter has just mentioned as well. This was all part of a bigger plan to become self-sufficient by 2023. And I asked questions on a regular basis at budgets and finance meetings, whether that was still the plan. And I can never get an answer because clearly it was not. The profitability of all those SK companies were not going to be achievable. And this was one of them that was going to generate profits and so on. And it is possibly done so in St. Martin's or whatever else like that, but it's not generally fulfilled that plan. And it's got to be recognised that that plan of 2018, 17, whatever it was, has not achieved its success. And it's if this is a recognition of that failure, then that's fine.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just to confirm, I think some of the comments that Councillor Knowles has made, and I would like to say that our officers involved in Invest SK are absolutely professionals. The criteria that they followed was set by the government, and there was no lapse in at any point of any of their professionalism in the distribution of those grants. In fact, our process was recognised not just locally across Lincolnshire, but across the county and further afield, for how expeditiously we managed to get those grants to those businesses that really needed it at that time. We followed all the guidance in terms of the government criteria. I know on several occasions businesses used to challenge me because we weren't supporting them. And the only final thing I would say is that if there are any businesses that are alleged of taking that illegally or by fraud, my personal view is that they should feel the full force of the law for doing that, because that is breaking the law and that is taking money fraudulently.
Okay, are there any other comments on Invest SK or this report? Does anybody require to go into private session to discuss the pink papers? Okay, I just have a couple of quick questions. As I say, firstly, I welcome this. I think that Investors K appeared at the first companies committee, and I think that the companies committee was concerned with scope creep at the time. And I think that a lot of work has gone in, particularly over the last couple of years, to define its scope properly. I think the professionalism of Investors K has increased during that time. And so I do welcome that. I would like to just comment on a question. What is the methodology for scrutiny when this comes in-house? Which cabinet position is it going to report to? How is it going to be scrutinised? So what's the methodology for ongoing scrutiny? How's that going to be done? What's the ongoing? You mentioned a comms plan. It's quite a complex comms plan with a lot of moving parts. Who's going to be defining that, and where's that going to go? Where's that going to live? How are we going to understand that? And I suppose finally, I mean, what are the lessons? Summarising some of the questions here. What are the lessons of the Invest SK episode? I'd just like to understand what we've learned from this. And just finally, again, without talking about the specifics of the pink papers, it's a question I tend to ask repeatedly, actually, in different areas in the finance. When I see vacancies, I wonder what we're not doing. So we have a number of vacancies here. Is there something that we're not doing? And if we're not doing it, why? What's missing? Do we need to do it? I just want to understand a little bit more about those vacancies, please. So, Councillor Cook, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start then, and I'm sure Mrs. McCoy-Brown will kick in when she wants to. So in terms of the scrutiny of our economic development function and business engagement, so obviously I'm currently the cabinet member for economic development and growth. So as the cabinet member, obviously I'll be presenting to your other committee, which is the Finance and Economic Development, well, the FEDCO committee anyway. So FEDCO committee will be the appropriate scrutiny committee that will look at our economic development plans. So obviously the business plan will move into a sort of an economic development strategy, which will obviously then be considered by that committee with some tangible outcomes of what we want to deliver and see. In terms of communications, obviously communications are already being run through the council. So obviously Alan is the director responsible for communications. I'm also the cabinet member. So we need to make sure that we've got a proper communication strategy in terms of how we address with businesses, because obviously we want to make sure that they're not seeing this news that the Invest SK is closing, but rather it's transitioning or relaunching as such back into the council. But obviously the team are still there and they'll still be engaging. You know, we're still going to have the website, we're still going to have all the social media handles, that won't be changing. We need to then be clear, obviously, in communications with the staff, so staff at both Invest SK, but also within the council as well, so they both understand the difference. Obviously council members, and then obviously the wider public as well, so they understand. So there will be a strategic communications plan, which we're very happy to share, either with either this committee or probably FEDCO, if we're being brutally honest about the transition from moving from as a company into the FEDCO remit. In terms of the other positions that we've held vacant, part of the reasoning for leaving some of those vacant were obviously prevalent on whether or not it was going to stay as an existing company or whether we were going to move it back into the council, which is why we sort of held the vacancies so far. But I know Councillor Trott-Bellew's got her visitor economy officer now. You know, we've got people in the team as such. And forgive me, Graham, I didn't write down quick enough a couple of the other points that you were raising.
So you were going to name the responsible cabinet member, and then just as I say, just as a reflection, what are the lessons of this episode, and what can we take on to this once this is in-house?
So the cabinet member will be me. That's quite an easy one. In terms of the lessons learned, I think it's similar to a conversation we had the other day, which actually I think it's probably worth doing a review into the whole process and you know what we've actually learned through that. At the time when it was set up, obviously I've detailed the challenges in terms of economic development wasn't a high priority of this council in reality. You know, we had a couple of people, but actually their intelligence in terms of the businesses and what it was actually doing and delivering for the district was very low. Whereas now we've got a complete difference in that now. So we've actually got that intelligence. It's what we now do with it and drive the local economy across all of our 4 towns and over 70 villages. So in terms of lessons learned, I think the ambition at the time was right, and obviously you'd have to ask the former leader of his experiences previously on that company setup. As with a lot of things, things change over that period, and that's 3, 4, 5 years ago now. And probably the world is very different then to what it is now.
Okay, I'm grateful for that. I think it is worth just reminding ourselves that Invest SK was set up long before the company's committee. So this was, it was probably reached its peak just as the company committee started in terms of expenditure. So it was already a going concern. Okay. Councillor, I'd like to move to a vote, but Councillor Dills, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'd just like to say, if I may, I welcome bringing Invest SK back in-house. I'll be glad when some of the others come back in-house as well. But as Councillor Baxter says, it was sold to us and to council taxpayers as a magic bullet to shed the shackles of local government. And it was going to help make us, the council, self-sufficient. It's about, the questions that were raised, I and others raised them at the time, about accountability, transparency and openness that everyone talks about. And actually, we've seen some of the problems today in the other companies we've talked about, that you and the Deputy Chair have raised yourselves this afternoon. But if, as Councillor Cook says, Invest SK has been such a success and so brilliant, why are we told in this report that it's unsustainable and it's now going to cost us 30,000 to bring it back in-house? I appreciate that we perhaps didn't have a list of top 10 businesses, but it's an awful expensive way of getting a list of those top 10 businesses. I appreciate he said that there are other successes of Invest SK. I'm sure there were. But, giving away 51 million, as Councillor Noel says, I could do that. And I'm sure they did a good job, a professional job at doing that and getting the money out quickly. And as you say, it's been recognised nationally. So I do welcome that. Having said that, I asked myself, and it's this accountability that we would have had if it was in-house. I asked at the time in writing, how much of that money, of government money, has come to my ward? Now, I think that's a reasonable question to ask. And I wasn't able to, I was told, oh, sorry, that's too difficult. It'd take too much time. Surely there are a list of postcodes. So that was a point. You said, Mr. Chairman, that the resignation of the government minister yesterday wasn't related to the fraud that he mentioned. Wouldn't suggest any fraud by Invest SK or its employees. It was, but we don't know what fraud there may have been amongst the recipients. Just as we don't know, how much of furlough was. I'll not go talk about furlough. So I welcome bringing the activities of Invest SK in-house, and welcome when we finally bring some of the other companies in-house to overcome some of the accountability and openness problems and transparency problems that have been highlighted this very afternoon. Thank you.
Councillor Dills, your comments are noted. In terms of your two observations about costs, they are detailed in the report, and I don't believe it mentions that it was unsustainable. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do love living in this election period. It's only a shame we've got another 15 months before the election. But, our team are incredible professionals, and let's not underestimate that. I think we need to acknowledge that, and we need to acknowledge the work that they've done over the last 2 years in supporting businesses which have been massively affected. And we have far more intelligence than just the top 10 businesses. That was just an example of, we didn't even have that level of detail. We've had some fantastic events down in the Deepings. We've had business breakfast events down in the Deepings with businesses, particularly at Park Care as well. Invest SK has done far more than I think what's being alluded to.
Okay, I would like to move to a vote. Councillor Rice-Oxley.
Apologies, I had a very quick question about exempt appendix 1.
Okay, you want to go into exempt papers, yeah? Okay, is it a specific that can't be asked in public domain? Okay, fine. So we are going to have to go into private session.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of information, and before you do, I appreciate that you said you didn't think it was said that the current model is unsustainable. May I refer you to paragraph 118 of the report that says, forgive me if I've got it wrong, but it says, it is apparent that the current operating model is unsustainable. And that's what I heard councillor Wotton actually say at the time.
Okay, that's noted. I'd like to move to the question. So we have a member wanting to go into private session. So some of the appendices in this report contain information which is exempt from publication. The press and public are therefore excluded during this session of these items under paragraphs 1 and 2 of section 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do I have a proposer for excluding press and public? Councillor Knowles, do I have a seconder? Councillor Whittington. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay.